Get ready for the westerly and be prepared for the southerly. It will be icy cold inland and icy cold on the shore. May the dawn rise red-tipped on ice, on snow, on frost. Join, gather, intertwine. So what we're going to cover today is we're going to try and understand what we mean by mental health and wellbeing and what keeps people and organisations well. So we're going to learn about the 5 ways to wellbeing and some practical things to improve wellbeing. We've also been sent through some questions and we'll attempt to answer all of those towards the end. If you have questions as we go through the presentation today, please just use the chat box and I'll pick them up later on. So I want to start with just a little exercise with everybody. What makes you feel good? So normally we would do this in a workshop environment, we'd have like 50 different cards and you could pick 1 or 2 that appeal to you. But I just want you to think about, where are you when you feel your best? What are you doing and who you're with? And maybe just pop some ideas into the chat box so we can all see and get a bit of a flavour for what that might look like. And I'll just give you a minute to do that. Thank you for contributing. It's great. It's nice to be able to read them. I love the dancing. I used to dance. Family appears a lot, doesn't it? In movement and being outside. Animals, nice. Yeah. Are you all reading them? I hope so. Nice. Oh, that's excellent. Thank you for joining in for sharing all of those. It's interesting, isn't it? So we start to see some themes there about how important people are to us and that we're actually social beings, and that connection with others is very important. Our animals are important. Nature is important to many people, and getting out and exercising also saw in their food. And there's a couple of areas in terms of the 5 ways to wellbeing that I don't think we covered off in there, and we'll cover them off as we go through today's presentation. So it's always good to start with understanding and having a shared understanding about what we're talking about. And for those of you who were on last week, I'm sorry, some of those, the first few slides are the same because it's about having consistency across the presentations. So a state of wellbeing is where we can reach our potential, cope with the normal stresses of normal daily life and work productively and contribute to the community. It's so much more than the absence of disease. And that's what we need to really remember. You know, we talk about our health system, but actually what we're talking about in general is an illness system. And so we talk about health in negative terms. And actually, the converse is true, that actually it's about, health is about doing well and reaching our potential and coping and managing with normal life. So aspects of work that harm or impair our mental wellbeing are often called psychosocial risks. And this may or may not be a term that you're used to, but it's a term that is being used more and more in the workplace to identify a whole range of risks that may impact your well-being. And those risks may include the work, the type of work, the volume of work, the nature of the work, how repetitive it is, may also include things like the environment and whether you have the right tools for the job, the people you work with, and what the culture of the organisation is like. So there's a lot of risks that in there that are actually called psychosocial risks. But for today, we're going to be talking in terms of mental wellbeing, but it's the same thing. So in terms of poor mental health, so we talk about mental distress, which is also known as mental illness, and it's different for everybody. We all have times when we struggle with our mental health. Depends what's happening to us in our own worlds and what's happening to us. Sometimes that's external to us as well. It impacts our well-being. Mental health problems can develop when these difficult experiences or feelings go on for a long time and there's no respite from them, and they're impacting our ability to enjoy our life. Sometimes that may result in a diagnosis, but not necessarily. Sometimes it just leaves us feeling very blah for a very long time. We know that poor mental well-being is costly to both individuals and organisations. It can be acute or chronic. So something might happen, and an event might happen, an accident or an incident or any sort of experience that causes us trauma and has an impact on us. Or it might be something that is chronic, something that's been going on. If you're not sleeping for a long period of time, then there's a much heightened risk of things like anxiety and depression, for example. So poor mental well-being, again, may be a result of a single or repeated exposure, so something that happens that leaves us feeling devastated, or a repeated exposure, and that thinking about psychosocial risk might be bullying at work or something to that extent. Impact can be mild to severe, so we might just feel a little bit off for a short period of time, or in actual fact, it might have a significant impact on us and may lead to something that is diagnosed or long-term. So mental health and well-being isn't just about what's going on internally for us. We're impacted by all these other things. So might be the culture that we're in, or the work culture that we're working in, might be our social relationships. How many friends have we got? Are they really good friends? How often do we connect with them? What kind of relationships do we have with them? Are they healthy relationships or harmful relationships? What's happening in terms of the economic and political system, in terms of job market, housing, the health system? All those things have the possibility of impacting our mental health and well-being. Our physical health. So if we are generally unwell for a period of time physically, then that can also lead to increases in anxiety and potentially other things as well. Our history can impact our mental well-being, our sense of justice, the environment, so that might be our physical environment, where we live, if our house is warm and dry or if it's cold and damp, if our workplace is cramped or if it's spacious. All of those environmental things can impact our mental well-being and our spiritual well-being, and how happy and content we are with what we're doing and where we are in life. So it's not just something that happens on the inside. We're hugely impacted by things outside of us as well. Now, I want to just talk today a little bit about resilience. I know lots of people don't like the word resilience anymore because it's kind of been overused in recent times, and people are told to be resilient, and Cantabrians have been told they're so resilient. I've been told I'm really resilient, and you get resilient fatigue. But this is kind of a different spin on it, and I think it's actually really helpful. So if we look at the line that goes across the middle of that model there, that's from birth to death. So that's from arriving to departing, and through our lifetime we have normal ups and downs, just because that's the way life is. And so the first one, for example, might be, you get your first boyfriend or girlfriend, and life is rocketing and you're so excited and you couldn't be more happy, and then it's over. So we go below the line, we dip. Life's a bit of a struggle for a while, and then we move on and get our first job, and life's exciting, and then something happens, and so it goes on through life. But the most important thing to know is that we can develop the individual skills and habits that help us through those tough times, but we can't rely solely on the individual skills and habits, and that's where our supportive environment is really, really important. So you can be the most resilient person in the world, but if you're working in an environment that is toxic and not good for you, then you're going to suffer, regardless of how good your individual skills and habits are. So I think that's a nice little model. In terms of the word resilience, it's been around since I wrote it down, actually. I think it was 1807. as when the word was first coined in the UK, and it's derived from a Latin verb called resilia, which is to rebound or to recoil. But these days, when we refer to resilience, we refer to more than rebounding or recoiling, because in actual fact, with resilience, often if something happens, we have to bounce into a different direction. So bounce forward or be adaptive and do something new and something different. So the meaning has taken on a broader understanding. So it's good to understand those terms. This is work by Dr. Lucy Hone. She is I think she's got a background in psychology, but specialises in resiliency. And she's based out of Canterbury University. So she's a local woman, and she's done a number of TED Talks. But what she talks about in terms of resilient people is these healthy habits. Resilient people know that suffering is part of being human. It's a perfect life is actually not the norm. So with our online platforms like Facebook and Insta, we see people having a perfect life, but that's how it's presented. That's not actually how it is. So resilient people know that perfect life is not the norm. Resilient people are good at identifying what they can change and accepting what they can't, and focusing on what you can change. So knowing what's in your circle of influence and what's not, and focusing on the things that you can change. And as we move through these COVID times, it's really important to be really clear about what are the things that we can change. And even in the time when there's so much uncertainty, focusing on the things that are still constant. Resilient people are really good at asking, is what I'm doing helping or harming me? This is actually my personal favourite of these questions. Is this helping or harming me? And also finding things to be grateful for. And a number of people do that as a daily habit. And certainly when life is tough and there is a lot of change, it's a really good thing to be doing and to be practicing. And the more we do it, the more we notice how there are good things happening in our life that we can be grateful for, even when it feels like there's a storm going on around us. So the statistics, and if you were on last week, you would have seen this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on it, but it's estimated that mental health problems cost New Zealand business at least 1.65 billion per annum. That is a significant amount of money. And in the last 12 months, I can't quite see the date, I think it says 2020, that's covered in videos of people. 20% of respondents experienced depression, 31% anxiety, and 60% stress. We live in a very high stress world, and so it's really important to think about all the different strategies that we can use to make sure that we stay well. The New Zealand Workplace Barometer last year reported that, I'm just going to have to move all these perfect pictures, 70% of respondents reported an absence from work during the last 12 months due to physical or mental health. 70%, that's a significant number of people. So we know that the things that are making people unhappy with their health, poor work-life balance, not spending much time outside, not getting enough exercise, not getting enough sleep, and not seeking medical treatment when somebody's unwell. And lots of people who are unhappy have indicated that they have been stressed in the last month. And people are less likely to keep their brains stimulated. So these things, and then we have the whole piece around they consider nurturing and maintaining relationships and spending time with family, but they're not actually already doing it. And we've already just seen in the chat experience how often that connection piece came up for people as being what they're doing to feel content and happy. Things that people worry about, so not having enough money, whether their kids are going to cope, and the planet. Global events and issues, and this is from Southern Cross's survey last year, so it'll be interesting to see if that's been impacted further over the last 12 months by the COVID pandemic, or if that actually already captures it. So you can see that there's a significant amount of things that cause people emotional worry, but there are things that we can do about it as well. So the business case for doing anything, it's about the people, it's the people. We want to improve our recruitment and retention. It's a lot of money to invest in getting people on board in a new position. And so it's important that we have workplaces where people want to be and want to be their best person. You have fewer disruptions that way, and you're going to be able to deliver better services and better products to your clients. You have a much better reputation. People are going to want to come and work for you, and you have less unplanned or sick leave if people are happier in their work. You also have people much more focused in the workplace if their well-being is looked after. So presenteeism is quite high. I don't have the statistic for it here, but that is when you're at work, but actually your mind is completely somewhere else. So you're there, you're physically there, but mentally not at all. And of course, the other reason is increased productivity and customer service, which I mentioned already. You can have all the knowledge, skills, and experience to do the job, but if you haven't got the energy to do the work, then your productivity is going to very much suffer. And of course, also in terms of creating a business case and probably the platform that many businesses work from, rather than the things that we've already talked about, is the legislation. So the Health and Safety at Work Act 2015, which requires businesses to take all reasonable and practicable steps to protect the health and safety of workers and to minimise harm to them so that they can go home safe and well. The Employment Relations Act also talks about maintaining good relationships with people, and the Human Rights Act, of course, which deals a lot with discrimination. So there's legislation out there that is also going to impact on the wellbeing piece. So what we want for our workers, we want you to feel good. So positive feelings and life satisfaction in general, knowing that, having looked at the resilience model, we do have ups and downs in our life, but overall we want people to feel good. We want people to function well. So we want people to do the things that provide meaning and purpose for them. So it's really important in the workplace to know what our purpose and what our role is and the overall vision and mission of the workplace. And the connection, again, it comes up again. So that sense of belonging is so important, and feeling valued. So those two go hand in hand. We want to feel like we belong to a team, and we want to feel like our work is valued. Then we're much more likely to be the good worker and continue doing the best job that we can. So the 5 Ways to Wellbeing has been around now for about 12 years. Might not be that long, but it feels like about 12 years. And it came out of research out of the United Kingdom. So international research identified these 5 different things that people can do either individually or in the workplace to have better wellbeing outcomes. So this particular toolkit was developed originally by the Mental Health Foundation and the Health Promotion Agency. So the first one, this is my favourite one, you probably got that by now because I talk about it all the time, is about connecting with people. So strong relationships with others are an essential part of building resilience and boosting wellbeing, and sets you up really well for when life is tough. So we know from research that people who have strong social connections prior to something happening to them are much more likely to be resilient through the process of recovering. So connecting is really, really important. Given the environment that we've been in with COVID, connection is even more important, and we've needed to do things differently. So we know that staying connected makes us feel safer, less stressed and anxious. And we know that the opposite, isolation, leads to stress, anxiety and depression. One of the things that's a really important question to ask, I think, during this period of time when there's so much conversation about vaccination. And, I know with a colleague of mine who didn't want to have a vaccine and was hesitant. She wasn't an anti-vaxxer, but she was hesitant. And her siblings stopped speaking to her. Her brother was a doctor, wouldn't talk to her. 2 sisters wouldn't talk to her, and her mother wouldn't talk to her. So, always ask, what am I sacrificing? Am I prepared to put our relationship on the line for this thing that's a thing now, but in 2 years or 3 years or 5 years, will we look back and say, I made the right decision, or did I sacrifice that relationship for no good cause? So think about that. What am I sacrificing? And is the decision I'm making now in line with my values? So it's good to not always just think about the COVID thing in the moment. We all get very caught up in it, but what's the broader thing? So if relationships and connection with family is more important to you than someone's choice, then just you need to be weighing those things up for yourself and think about what you're sacrificing. In terms of the workplace and the conversations that go on in the workplace, it's really important to focus on what is important. So what is the job that you're there to do? What is the purpose of the organisation, and how can we focus on the purpose and let discussion and vaccinations almost take a back seat? Let them be dealt with. Certainly some of them have been dealt with in terms of mandates, and in terms of organisations where there's not mandates, then the health and safety teams and the management will be doing risk assessments to look at whether or not workplaces should be mandating that. But focus on what is important. If you're working from home, then it's really important to be having regular catch-ups with your teams. So I would suggest short ones every day just to say hello. And also for teams that have new people on board, then it's really important to do this so that people have the opportunity to get to know their team throughout this period of time. And also one-on-one catch-up. So don't just rely on a team catch-up, but make sure that you're catching up with each of your team members at least once a week on a one-on-one. If you can catch up personally, in person, safely, then do so. I know a friend of mine yesterday had morning tea at one of his team members' house on the deck. She lives in Devonport, has a lovely view of the water. So they all sat round on the deck for a quick catch up and a coffee before they went back to their respective homes to continue to work. So think about how you can do that and how people, or the things that need to happen for people to feel safe to do that. For some people that will be maintaining a physical distance, and for some people that will mean wearing their mask throughout the process, and for some people it will mean staying away. So being respectful of those things. In terms of the communication and connection piece, use a variety of platforms. Make sure that if you are communicating any information that it's really relevant and not overwhelming for people. Make sure that you use a variety of methods. So some people like graphs, some people like tables, some people like bullet points, some people like pictures. For some people, it will be important to do it in different languages. So know your strengths of your team and know what their needs are. And again, building strong relationships when all is going well will help us get us through the tough times. Right, keep on learning. Oops. Being curious and seeking out new experiences positively stimulates the brain. So this isn't about formal learning. This is about being curious. So what can you be curious about? How many questions do you normally ask? Think about how you can keep learning in your workplace as well as in your personal space. I learn French, so and I don't do it formally. I do have lessons, but and it's really challenging. I had a French lesson this morning, and it's very challenging, but it's also very good for me, and it takes a lot of practice. So the thing with keeping on learning is that be kind to yourself. You know, it takes a while to learn a new skill. It takes a long time to learn French, and be forgiving of yourself with making mistakes when you're learning. It's an important part of the process. And being in an organisation where the culture allows mistakes for learning is also important. Be active, and we know this because this has been around for such a long time. But what we may not know is that it's a nice little slogan, move your mood. So when we're active, we release endorphins, and endorphins make us feel better. So being active is not just good for us physically, it's actually really good for us mentally. So it's good for both our bodies and our minds. So given the changes and the restrictions that we've had and the fact that gyms and things in Auckland anyway are still closed, how are you being active, and are you making sure that you maintain your physical exercise, because it is good for your mood? And if you're feeling flat, I encourage you to get outside and go for a walk or do something. So giving, so carrying out acts of kindness, whether small or large, can increase our happiness and our well-being, our sense of, and our life satisfaction, sorry. What we know here too is that if someone gives a compliment to one person, the person giving the compliment feels better, the person receiving the compliment feels better, and anybody who's actually seen that interaction happen also feels better. It doesn't cost anything to give a compliment. So take notice. So paying more attention to the present moment, to thoughts and feelings, and to the world around you can boost our well-being. So knowing with yourself, checking in with yourself, did I get enough sleep last night? What's my mood like? What's going on that's causing me stress? How do I deal with those things internally? Oh, my voice was a bit loud or a bit fast, or I was a bit rude or impatient. What's going on? So just being curious about yourself is a really good start, and being curious about other people too. Take notice of your colleagues and your friends. Check in with them and see how they're going. Make sure you notice what's happening with the weather. We go to work, we stay inside, and we don't see what's happening outside. So take the opportunity to take notice what's happening with the weather, what's happening with the seasons, what's happening with the plants around us, what's happening in the environment that we work in, the physical environment that we work in. Take notice and just be curious. Don't have to be judgmental, but just be curious. So they're the 5 things, 5 ways to well-being. So thinking about your work environment, we're going to use the chat box here again. Think about the work environment. Before we talked about family and food and exercise and pets and dancing. We didn't talk about giving. I didn't see anything in terms of giving in the chat box earlier, but think about the workplace. What are the things that help you to have a good day? And if you could just use the chat box, and let's have a look and see what people say. Oops. So think about when you're at work, what do you need to have a good day? What's really nice to see is that people do lots of these things anyway, and it's good to remind ourselves that you're doing lots of these things anyway. And it's also good to notice with intention where the gaps are. So what are the things that we're good at, and where can we improve? And this is great. The feedback thing's really important, isn't it? Oh, look, some of these I've written in my examples for you. You've cheated. You've seen my presentation. This is great. A dog in the office. Wow. Whereabouts do you work, Connie? Nice. The idea of humour at work is very important, isn't it? So having a culture where it's all right to have some humour is really important. Oh, nice. Music. So the relationship piece at work is very important, isn't it? Oops, I missed one. Someone's solutions, yes. Yeah. And it's interesting in terms of health and safety that the general way of working has moved from a blame culture to understanding what works most of the time and focusing on what works most of the time as where you do your learning rather than looking at that blame. Really important. Yeah, respect. Thank you guys for sharing. It's excellent. So what I want to do now is to get you to ask some questions. So we're going to do a little bit of work on you and your team and some thinking around that. Normally we do this again at tables and things and move around rooms, but I want you to think about yourself and think about the 5 ways to wellbeing. So you can see them there on the screen. And I want you to ask in terms of what you're already doing for each of those. So lots of you talked about coffee and walking, taking the dogs out, connecting with family. So I want you just to jot down, just draw yourself that if you want to, or do it any way that suits you. But ask, what are you already doing? What did you used to do that you've stopped doing? So it's really important in times of significant change that often we stop doing things that we actually love doing. So for the dancers out there, are you still dancing? Are you dancing in your bedroom? Are you still dancing? What's your plan to get back to dancing? I used to dance in my bathroom, in front of my bathroom mirror. It's a bit mad, I know, but anyway. So what did you used to do that you have stopped doing? And what would you like to start doing or do more of? Or what would you like to stop doing or do less of? So just take a minute and jot some ideas down on a piece of paper. If you've got any questions about that, just fire them through. Oops. I should stop fiddling with my mouse. Okay. So because we're talking about wellbeing at work, that was your warm up. What we really, really want you to do as well is to think about workplace wellbeing and how you can plan for that. So being more intentional with it at work. So it becomes part of the system, the way that you do business as usual, rather than something that's ad hoc. So in terms of the 5 ways to wellbeing, what are you already doing that supports the 5 ways to wellbeing? Some of you have said you make coffee for colleagues or you go walking at lunchtime. There's a variety of things that you already do. Do you have stand-up meetings? Do you have a sit-stand desk? What are the things that you're already doing? Do you park your car miles away and walk to the office? Do you take the stairs? What are you doing already? What would you like to start doing or do more of as a team that would impact your wellbeing? And what would you like to stop doing or do less of? And that's a really interesting thing, because sometimes, I know I was in a job recently where we had team meetings where the person who ran them actually just sat down the head of the table and they weren't a collaborative affair. And I just didn't want to do them anymore because I didn't think they were very effective. What can you control to minimise the negative things or barriers to wellbeing? So what are the things that you can put in place to make your experience of work better for you? So again, just take a couple of minutes to think about this from a team perspective and a workplace perspective. All right. I did do some examples for you, but I just wanted you to think a little bit first. So here's some examples, the different 5 ways to wellbeing and things that you can do in the workplace. So you can see there, one of them is about the coffee connection, others are getting together to reflect on your achievements. So they're looking at your strengths and what's working, or rather than always looking at what's wrong. It's very easy to get into a situation where, I work in health and safety a lot, and it's very easy for people to get into a situation where they just want to complain about what's not working. But actually you want to tip the conversation on its head and say, what is working and what are we doing well? What things do we need to change? Just checking in with people, asking how they are, whether it's friends or colleagues. Plan social occasions at work, and this is going to be really important as we reconnect in the workplace. As people have been, in Auckland, we're still obviously working from home, but as we move to a more hybrid situation in Auckland and elsewhere in the country, getting back into the office together and having social occasions where you can actually come together and connect face to face. In Auckland, we can now do that with picnics with 25 or more people. So there's the opportunity to do that in the workplace. Talking to each other instead of emailing or texting. I have a personal rule: if I get 3 texts from someone, I call them, because it's just easier, right? Have a conversation with someone on the phone. But if I'm in the office, I'll actually just get out of my chair and go and see them, which could possibly be quite annoying for some people. And the regular check-in things. So that is about your teams checking in. So having a regular meeting time with your teams if you are in the office, or having a regular Zoom or Teams meeting if you're not in the office, just to check in on people, see how they're going, see what's working for them and what their barriers are to doing their work. So keeping learning, and some of this we've talked about already. So things that you can do: practice asking questions. How was that used? That, what, why, how, when, who, questions. Just be curious, be curious. Just a note on the use of why. Be careful with it, because depending on what you're asking can cause people to be a little bit defensive. So just do that one with a little bit of care. So share your knowledge. If you're an expert at something, or you've got a particular skill, be willing to share it so others can learn. And of course, the opposite to that is to learn a new skill. Might be knitting. Knitting is apparently quite popular in lockdown. Encourage teamwork on projects so that you learn from each other. Collaboration is a great way to learn from each other. And allow time for learning. So when you're learning a new role or a new task, it takes longer. So allow time for that. Make sure that you're developing a culture where it's okay to make a mistake, and also where it's okay to ask for help. Learn and be curious about other cultures. We work in a very multicultural environment in Auckland, and so be curious about other people who might not be the same as you. Be active. Here's some examples. I've talked about some of these already. Take the stairs, park away from the office and walk. Take a lunchtime walk with a colleague, or by yourself if you need the space. Have walking or standing meetings. They tend to be very efficient. Walk to talk. Use a standing desk or sit on a Swiss ball. Play social sport with each other. This will, we'll be allowed to do it again soon. Walk to meetings outside the office rather than driving. Give a compliment. Make someone else a cup of coffee. Do voluntary work. Smile. We'll compliment someone. Share food together. We did this in my last job. We did this quite often. Someone would go down and buy just slices, and then we'd literally dice them up into tiny little pieces, and everybody'd have a tiny little taste. Give your time at work to lend a hand. So if someone's having a tough time or got a big project, see what you can do to help, and share what works. It's really important in the workplace to be sharing our stories about what works, rather than just always focusing on what doesn't. So then we can build a really good idea of what our strengths are if we know what's working. Take notice. Ask someone about their life and wait for an answer. So ask, push pause, wait, listen. Ask questions and start a discussion. Again, check in on yourself. What have I eaten? What exercise have I done? How well did I sleep? Am I taking time out for me to rest and recover? And am I using the 5 ways to support my own mental well-being? Take notice of your environment and take notice of others. Think about your body language, your tone, and your voice. So just take notice. And they're just examples. That's not a complete list, obviously, but that's just to give you some ideas of practical things that you can do. So when you've decided what it is that you want to do, it's good to make a plan. So think about the workplace. Think about, sorry, a cat's just come through the window. Think about the workplace. Think about the 5 ways and what things resonate with you about what you could do differently in the workplace. So what are the 5 ways? What's the action that you think that you need to take to start doing? Who's going to do it? Will take the lead on it? When are you going to do it? And does it need a budget or resource to do it? So just a really simple action template. But if you do this, I know you're probably all working from home at the moment or in some hybrid situation, but if you do something like this and then take it back to the workplace, it's a great place to start that discussion or ask questions about how do we implement 5 ways to wellbeing in our workplace, in our team? What should we do? Who wants to be in on this? How do we get started? So that's using those questions, right? So there's just some examples there. Think about what your workplace offers in terms of supporting your wellbeing. Does it have an EAP program? Who are your key staff contacts? Who are your local health and wellbeing providers? Do you have training, for example, mental health first aid? What other training? Do you have communication training, conflict resolution training? How do those trainings impact on wellbeing? Do people in the workplace, the health and safety people or the human resource people, know how to create healthy workplaces in terms of the workload and so forth? Of course, you can go to these websites and get updated lists of helplines and local mental health services. And also, of course, you can go to the COVID-19 website for resources as well. The Mental Health Foundation has a number of really good resources online. So it has lots of resources for working well and templates that I encourage you to have a look at. It has a toolkit for the 5 ways to wellbeing at work and a collection of online training materials for managers. There's other resources as well, which I would just draw your attention to. I'm trying to use my mouse so it flicks the page. So you can see those there as well. Also, WorkSafe has a number of resources around COVID. Specific resources around COVID that the Mental Foundation has are these 2. So there's the COVID-19 workplace resource, and then there is a webinar there by Lisa Ducat that was done last year, which is also very helpful. So just to finish off, we have one question before we go to the review. Let's go to the question. Clang is a handy way to remember all 5 ways to wellbeing. Thank you, Wendy. Okay, someone wants to have a look at a slide just before the 5 ways to wellbeing. So I'll just go back as they wanted to grab it. Oh, that's a long way back. Was it that one? Someone could just say yes or no. Cool. That's lucky. Okay. So hopefully today you've learned a bit more about mental health and wellbeing and the importance of being on the same page in terms of our understanding. It's really common for people to talk at cross purposes, really, because we don't have a shared understanding of what we mean. So that's an important thing for people to be doing. And to understand what keeps people well in organisations. Hopefully you've learned some more about the 5 ways to wellbeing and some practical things. I wanted you to learn some practical things that you could take away and do for yourselves. If you've got any questions, we've got time for some questions, so please use the chat box and I will answer them or attempt to answer them. 3rd to last slide, all right. these slides will eventually be available. So third to last slide, can you just give me a bit more of a tip about what it's got on it, maybe? Oh, the yellow highlights, okay. That one? Oh, no, the next one. There you go. So any questions, please use the chat box. Okay, so good question. People will be returning to the workplace soon. So how can you use the 5 ways to wellbeing for that purpose? I think it's one of the really important things is obviously the connections piece. So as people return to the workplace, you need to be having discussion about how that will happen before it happens. And then you need to be getting people together in a safe way when they are returning. And what I would really encourage is that you have a discussion about it. So it becomes a part of a team meeting. How do we want to do this for our team? We know the research is really clear that this is going to have a positive impact on our well-being. So how do we do this for ourselves and our team, and focus on it that way? It's also important to know that there's structural things that need to happen from a system level to enhance our well-being, and that's what last week's presentation was about. Next week's presentation, of course, is about dealing with stress, which will be for a number of people returning to the workplace. Some people will be very excited about that, and the stress experience will be positive, and there'll be others who will be very concerned about that and fearful of what that might mean for their health. So they're important things to deal with in terms of returning to the workplace. So in terms of mental health first aid, it's just a type of training. It's not the be all and end all, it's just a type of training. Mostly it gives you an idea about what is a little bit more knowledge about depression and anxiety and how to deal with people if you're concerned about them. You'll just have to Google it. Any other questions? Okay, well, I want to thank you for your attention today, and I will just finish this. Oh, I've got one more question. Sorry, you just snuck in there. Oh, thank you. So I'll finish with a karakia. Restrictions are moved aside, so the pathway is clear to return to everyday activities, and that is especially relevant for Auckland.